All right, let's take a journey back in time, shall we? We're going to dive into the epic story of ancient Greece, told in 6 acts.
But first, let's ask the big question. I mean, think about it. Why does the civilization from way back, like 2,500 years ago, still have such a grip on us? Our politics, our art, even our sports, so much of it circles back to them. So what's their secret? Let's get into it.
Okay, so our story, Act 1, begins not with the people, but with the place, the land itself. You just can't understand the Greeks without understanding their home, the Hellat. It was like this dramatic stage, and it pretty much decided the fate of everyone who lived there.
It was all about two big forces pulling in opposite directions. First, you've got the sea, which was basically their highway to the rest of the world. It made them natural sailors, traders, explorers. But then you've got the mountains. These things are everywhere, chopping up the land into these little isolated valleys. That made it super hard to get around and farm. So the sea connected them, but the mountains kept them apart. And that tension, that's the key to, well...
But hang on. Before we even get to the Greeks we usually think of, there were others. On the island of Crete, you had the Minoans, a kind of mysterious civilization, right? Master sailors who built these huge, incredible palaces like Knossos, and they had this whole thing with bulls. They were the opening act, you could say.
And after the Minoans, enter the Mycenaeans. Now these guys were different. Think warrior kings, giant fortified cities, golden death masks. This is the stuff of legends, literally. This is the age of the Trojan War, the heroes you read about in the Iliad.
So those early kingdoms, they eventually just collapsed. Greece goes into what historians call a dark age. It's a tough time. But out of the ashes, something totally new, something revolutionary starts to form. An idea that would not only define Greece, but honestly change the world. It was called the polis.
Now, this is maybe the most important thing to get about ancient Greece. A polis isn't just a city. No. It's more like a completely independent country. Imagine your city having its own government, its own laws, its own army. Your loyalty wasn't to Greece, it was to your polis. You were Athenian or Spartan or Corinthian first. This was the building block for the whole civilization.
So what happens when these city-states get too crowded? Well, they had this amazing process. They didn't just conquer their neighbors. Instead, they'd basically plant a new seed. They'd choose a leader, go ask the famous oracle at Delphi for a blessing, gotta get the gods on your side, right? And then, boom, they'd found a brand new, totally independent polis somewhere else. This is how the Greek world spread all over the Mediterranean.
All right, Act 3. Now, when you have all these independent, proud city-states, you're going to get rivalries. And the biggest, most famous rivalry of all time? Athens versus Sparta. These two weren't just rivals, they were like two completely different worlds, with totally opposite ideas about, well, everything.
It all starts with one question. Who gets the power? In Athens, their revolutionary answer was the citizens, the people. They called it democracy. But in Sparta, nope. Power belonged to a small group, a couple of kings, a council of elders, a few overseers. An oligarchy. So rule by the many versus rule by the few. A huge difference right from the start.
And that difference bled into every part of their lives. Athens was all about art, philosophy, trade. They wanted to create well-rounded citizens. Sparta, it was a military machine, period. The goal of a Spartan's life was simple: become the perfect soldier. Everything, and I mean everything, was dedicated to the army.
And you know where you see this difference most clearly? Look at the lives of women. It's just night and day. In Athens, women had basically no legal rights and were kept hidden away at home. But in Sparta, Spartan women had way more freedom. They got an education, they ran the estates while the men were at war, and they were respected as the mothers of warriors. Just two completely different planets.
So Act 4, Splendor in War. This whole rivalry between Athens and Sparta, it's really the story of the classical age of Greece. It was a time of absolute, mind-blowing brilliance and also just devastating self-destruction. Just look at this timeline. It's a total roller coaster. First, the Persian Wars begin, and against all odds, the Greek city-states actually team up and beat back this huge empire. That victory kicks off the golden age of Athens. But that rivalry with Sparta just keeps simmering until, bang, the Peloponnesian War. The two sides go all in against each other, and it all ends with Athens defeated and the whole of Greece just broken and weak.
Yeah, the Peloponnesian War was a total catastrophe. It shattered the Athenian Empire and left this huge power vacuum. All of Greece was weakened. And guess what?
There was a new power growing up in the north, just waiting for its moment to step in.
And that brings us to Act 5. While the great city-states were busy fighting each other to a standstill, this kingdom up north called Macedonia, a place the Greeks kind of looked down on as, barbarians, was getting ready to take over.
It started with the father, King Philip II. This guy was a military genius. He completely reformed his army, created this unstoppable formation called the phalanx, and then did what the Greeks could never do themselves. He united them. Okay, he united them by conquering them, but still.
And then came the son, Alexander the Great. He took that incredible army his dad built and just unleashed it on the Persian Empire. We're talking about a campaign of just over a decade where he conquered pretty much everything from Egypt all the way to the borders of India. It was one of the largest empires the world had ever seen, just breathtaking.
But Alexander died super young, only 33. His empire immediately got carved up by his generals, so you might think that's the end of the story. But his real legacy wasn't the empire itself, it was the culture he spread. He created this new Hellenistic world, this incredible mix of Greek culture with all the cultures of the East. And that changed everything.
Which brings us to our final act, Act 6, the immortal legacy. Because even after the empires fell, the ideas of Greece lived on. And man, do they still echo in our world today.
You see it everywhere. I mean, think about their gods, the whole family drama up on Mount Olympus. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Athena. They weren't perfect, distant beings. They were flawed, they were jealous, they were, well, a lot like us. And those stories, we're still telling them.
Or just look around you at our buildings. The Greeks basically gave us the language of architecture. You've got the Doric column, right? Simple, strong, no nonsense. That's the Parthenon. Then the Ionic, a bit more elegant with those scroll shapes at the top. And finally, the Corinthian, the fanciest of them all. We still use these designs for our most important buildings today.
So that brings us right back to where we started. Democracy, philosophy, drama, history, architecture, the list just goes on and on. They really did lay the groundwork for so much of our world, which leaves us with one final question to think about. Out of all those incredible ideas, which single one do you think is the most powerful, the most important one that's still alive today?